What's up, Game Weepers? Lilia's dad here, and I know you are all wondering what is happening on Summoner's Rift after the huge changes came in for 11-13. Like, what has happened to the champions that were abusing Stridebreaker, like Darius and Urgot? What has happened to those AD assassins after the huge Prowler's Claw nerfs? Is the split push meta back because of the new Hullbreaker item? And are ADCs still trash? Yes. Well, in the next 10 minutes, the other questions, I'm going to break down exactly what is going down and how this patch has affected our favorite champions. But before I do, you are going to hit that sub button, otherwise I'm playing a Bro Guides ad, and you are also going to check out the GameWeeb website for the most up-to-date Challenger tier content on the web. Champion courses and guides made by the best in the business, up to 20 a week, by the way, so get that exclusive access by signing up. Links in the description and comment section. Alright, so let's get into it. And first of all, guys, we're going to talk about the Stridebreaker change that came in and what this has actually done to the champions that were abusing Stridebreaker. So if you think of Darius, Urgot, Sett, Garen, Gnar, Nocturne, all of these champions were actually really strong with the old Stridebreaker. So what does it mean now that Stridebreaker doesn't have a dash in there? Well, we'll start with Darius. Now for Darius, guys, what's interesting here is that yes, in lower elos and, well, across the board overall, his win rate has decreased. And on the first day of the patch, his win rate overall was actually just like 45%, which is super low, right? But it has increased since then. And what's interesting here is that Darius's win rate in higher elo has actually improved by 1% or 2. And the reason being, guys, yes, okay, you don't have a dash to use as often as before. But here's the thing, the best Dariuses in the world aren't actually running teleport. They're running Ghost, which yes, I know they were running Ghost beforehand, but it's like a little compensation in a way for the Stridebreaker nerf. Because Darius's biggest weakness, as for the rest of these champions who use Stridebreaker, is getting kited. This is why in the top lane, if you're against a ranged champion, it's very hard to play against them because you don't have that gap closer, especially now, of course. But with Ghost, this actually gives you enough mobility to get in there, activate that new Stridebreaker slow, which is now 90%, remember? And I think what's also important that's going to help you guys out if you are still struggling is that in teamfights, try not to play the fight as linear as possible. And this is what I mean by this. Let's say there's a fight at Baron happening. Most players are going to fight in a straight line, as in the fight is going to take place just in that river. And you may have seen this in pro play a few times, but if you can flank the enemy team and get behind them or come from the side, this can be way more effective on champions like Darius, on Renekton, on Urgot, on Sett, on Gnar, rather than just running straight in there because it's way too obvious what you're going to do, and you can get kited that way. So try to flank that team fight, guys, and come in from behind, and you'll have a much better chance of winning. But I actually don't think the Stridebreaker nerf is as bad as it seems, especially if you know how to navigate Darius and play him at a high level. Now for the other champions with Stridebreaker, guys, Gnar has actually improved a lot. And the reason being, if you think of Darius, so you have Ghost for that mobility. If you think of Gnar, because you have your Hop and your ultimate, you actually already have an innate gap closer, which allows you, without Stridebreaker, to get in there and jump on the enemy champion's heads. And even before this Stridebreaker change, just like you were using the active to actually slow the enemy champions, not really for the dash. Now, of course, this might hurt you in lane because, yes, you're not going to be using this as often to gap close the enemy champion, especially if you're in your mini Gnar form, but it does mean that your ultimate is so much scarier, and if you can jump on that enemy backline, it is going to clean house. And this is why Gnar's win rate, actually in higher elo, has improved by over 2%. So an underrated pick despite all the recent nerfs to him. Now another Stridebreaker abuser, Sett. Sett has unfortunately been hit by this, and the reason being is because you simply don't really have a legit gap closer like Gnar, unlike Darius with Ghost. Okay, you have your Q, which speeds you up when running towards enemy champions, but it's not as quick, it's easier to react to, of course. So really what you become with Stridebreaker the later the game goes is a flash cooldown. If you don't have your flash, you can't really make use of Stridebreaker as well as these other champions, and this is why Sett's win rate has dropped. Now one champion that I predicted was going to be super OP this patch is actually turning out to be so, and this is Nocturne. And with this new Stridebreaker change, because you have an innate dash in your kit with your ultimate, instantly get onto that enemy champion, you don't have to gap close to get there, you know, you just press R and you're on top of them. When you use Stridebreaker, that 90% slow, they cannot escape. It doesn't matter if the AD carry or the mid laner you're jumping on has their support next to him, you are going to get your fear off, you are going to get your combo off, you are probably going to kill them. And this is seeing Nocturne's win rate increase across the board, but even in higher elo again, this has improved by at least 1%, so I'd highly recommend Nocturne before he gets nerfed. Now the last champion we have to talk about here in regards to Stridebreaker is Urgot, of course, and Urgot has been kind of responsible for the Stridebreaker change and what's happened to Titanic Hydra recently, because he's been incredibly OP in the top lane this season, and this patch was interesting. Stridebreaker, yes, this is a bit of a hit because it's not like you have an instant gap closer in your kit. Okay, you have your E, but this is like a charge and it's easy to react to. But what's actually making you OP, and funnily enough, Urgot's win rate, get this, in Master and above has increased almost 5%. This is because of Hullbreaker. And this is legit broken that top lane. Yes, you still go Stridebreaker. Yes, you still go Titanic Hydra. When you get a Hullbreaker in there, which is giving you health, of course, which synergizes with Titanic's passive, the AD as well comes in useful. And when you are split pushing you, getting all those extra resistances, it is close to impossible to bring you down. Now in lower elos, yes, your win rate has decreased because the laning phase is just going to be harder because you don't have that dash, but once you get to your 3-item spy, guys, even if you are behind, the item is just so broken that you can get back into any game, and this is the reason his win rate has improved drastically in high elo. Now the next mythic item on the chopping block this patch was Prowler's Claw, and if you didn't already know, the dash in Prowler's Claw that allowed you to dash to minions and jungle monsters on top of enemy champions, this is only applying to enemy champions now. So if you're playing Talon, if you're playing Zed, if you're playing Qiyana, you can no longer gap close to that enemy champion by Prowler's Clawing to an enemy range minion and then jumping on the enemy champion. This is no more, which means you're now going to have to use your abilities to get close to that enemy champion in order to use your combo, and because you're using an ability to gap close, you don't have that ability to actually damage the enemy champion or for the actual 1v1 itself. Now thankfully for Zed, the other lethality mythics are actually pretty viable on you. If you think of Eclipse, if you think of Duskblade, you can go either of these and be just as effective. And even though Qiyana doesn't work as well with Eclipse or Duskblade like Zed, the thing is that Qiyana is so broken anyway that she doesn't even really need a mythic to be useful, and because of that damage and the fact she had so many gap closes in her kit already, it's like the Prowler's Claw was the icing on the cake. It's not like you actually really needed the active. Even the nerf to the Claw's lethality hasn't had that big of an impact because Seeker's Arm Guard isn't as strong as what it used to be, of course, so it's not like you need the 21 lethality to actually be effective against these champions. But unfortunately for Talon, you are on the other end of the spectrum because you don't really have another gap close yet in your kit. Yes, okay, you can Q to a ranged minion, but then you don't have that for your combo. You might be able to flash in, but like said, you are now a flash cooldown. You don't have that extra gap closer to start off your combo, and this has seen Talon's win rate decrease in higher reloads. So the actual nerf to Prowlers, yes, it looks big, but in the state of the game and the big picture, it's really not that bad for AD Assassins. You are still going to be able to one-shot people and carry games. Now let's mix it up and talk about the mage mythics that got changed this patch, guys. So for Everfrost, for Luden's Tempest, and for Liandry's Anguish, the total cost of these items went down by 200 gold. And it doesn't matter what mage you're playing, pretty much every mage in the game has improved in the win rate department this patch because of this change. Because these items are now more accessible, you're hitting your mythic power spike earlier in a game, therefore having more impact, therefore giving yourself more opportunity to get kills and assists, and it actually expedites the process of you getting your subsequent items as well. So you get to Zhonya's quicker, you get to Void Staff quicker, Deathcat quicker, whatever champion you're playing, whatever items you're building, your full build is just being completed earlier in a game. So for mages, it's been a great patch for you, especially with the Prowler's Claw nerf as well. You're not going to die as much in the mid lane against those AD Assassins. Now the big item change that came in this patch, guys, was the new Hullbreaker item, and it is ridiculous. For 2800 gold, as you can see, you're getting 50 attack damage and a lot of HP and a passive, which makes you immune to damage. Now champions like Warwick, like Trundle, like Nasus, these great side laners and 1v1ers, haven't actually really been abusing this item all that much, even though it is still good on them, but there are two champions who are abusing this more than any other champs in the game, guys, and one of them I mentioned, so Urgot, is really strong with it, and the other champion who is super OP with it is Kled, and the same reason. Because you're building Titanic Hydra, you're benefiting from the HP, and of course the AD is handy because you are an AD champion, and the passive, as we all know, makes you an insane split pusher. So as Kled, if you're going Gore Drinker, if you're going Sunfire, just whatever you're going as your mythic, follow this with Titanic Hydra and then a Hullbreaker, you are going to be solo killing everyone who comes near you. And I know there are a bunch of other champions who can use Hullbreaker because it is busted at the moment, but these two, Urgot and Kled, guys, are the two front runners in 11-13. Now the last major item we have to talk about, guys, for 11-13 and what this has meant for the Rift is the new item Anathema's Chains. Now Anathema's Chains, guys, is great, okay, because it's 2500 gold and it's giving you the second most HP in the game after Warmogs, ability haste, which is obviously useful in pretty much every champion, but there is one champion who synergizes ridiculously well with the new Anathema's Chains, and this is Shen. And as you can see, 650 HP you're getting for just 2500 gold. Are you kidding? That's the second most in the game, by the way, behind Warmogs. You're getting 20 ability haste, which of course is great for Shen for your basic abilities, more taunts, more passives, and your ultimate, and the active and passive on Anathema's Chains is what make this blue ninja so broken. You can actually select the enemy champion from cross map. The range is global, so if you're sitting in base and all of a sudden you want to ult into a team fight, you can actually select that enemy champion who's jumping onto your AD carry, your mid laner, before you even get there, so that when you do actually get there and you taunt them, you're then accessing Anathema's Chains passives, and because you're taunt, you know, the enemy champion you're taunting has to attack you. This means you're stacking Anathema's Chains passive, getting to those max stacks quicker, so then you reduce their tenacity, and this is why it just pops off with the blue ninja. Now, if any of you are Shen mains and you've already tested this out, let me know in the comments what you think of it and how broken this is. If you haven't already tested it out, try out Warmog's Armor, Sunfire Aegis, and then Anathema's Chains. This could well be the best build of the entire patch, so make sure you abuse it, guys, before it's too late. Now, as far as other champions in the game go, guys, with Anathema's Chains, the issue for a lot of these is that a lot of champions in the game have knockups, which doesn't actually work with tenacity, so the passive in Anathema's Chains isn't going to be as useful. So if you think of a champion like Ornn maybe, who works really well with HP, but because he has like 3 knockups, it's not going to be as useful. If you think of Nautilus in the bot lane if you think of Zac in the jungle. But you might say to me, well, what about a champion like Leona, who seems perfect, right? Because you've got roots and stuns all over the place. Look at the Iron Solari with Knight's Vow, and then if you want to go Thornmail or something else after that, this is probably still going to be the build, unless of course you actually really need Anathema's Chains to lock down and mitigate the damage of an enemy carry. So let's say the enemy team has a really fed Vayne or Katarina or Jinx or Kha'Zix, one of these champions who is like a hyper carry. Yes, Anathema's Chains then becomes legit. But if the game is even or even somewhat even, there's actually not that much point to build it, especially early on. As I said, test this out on Shen. He is there to play, he is there for free LP, so give it a try this patch, guys. And as I said, let me know in the comments what you think of any of the changes we've just talked about and the champions as well. And this has been the Jizz, and until tomorrow's video, bye.